Imagine a world where a mysterious disease decimated almost half the population. Entire cities were abandoned, bodies piled up in the streets, and no one knew how to protect themselves. This was the reality of Europe in the 14th century during the Black Death, one of the deadliest pandemics in history. Today, we will dive into the history of the Black Death, how it started, how it spread, the horrors it caused, and how it changed the world forever. Come see what's beyond the surface, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the bell. The Black Death, as the bubonic plague is known, is a disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, transmitted mainly by fleas that infested rats. It reached the European continent in the mid-1/4th century. In the year 1347, the bubonic plague arrived in Europe. The most common form of the disease arrived through merchant ships that brought not only spices and fabrics but also rats infested with fleas carrying the Yersinia pestis bacteria. The symptoms were horrendous. The infected developed buboes, swellings, painful and purulent in the armpits, groin and neck. The high fever consumed their bodies, while black spots appeared on their skin, a sign of internal bleeding. In a few days, many succumbed to death. At that time, without knowledge of bacteria or proper hygiene, doctors wore bird-beaked masks filled with aromatic herbs, hoping to ward off the miasmas they believed caused the disease. Mortality was terrifying. 30 to 60% of the infected died, and entire cities were decimated. In some cases, the plague was not limited to buboes. Septicemic plague arose when the bacteria invaded the bloodstream, causing a widespread infection. Those who contracted it suffered from extremely high fever, chills, and hemorrhages under the skin, which left black and sinister spots. In advanced stages, gangrene took over the extremities. Fingers, hands, and feet turned black and necrotic, a sign that death was imminent. Septicemic plague was relentless. Almost 100% of those infected died, often in less than 48 hours. Accounts from the time described bodies abandoned in the streets, with black marks that seemed like signs of a divine curse. For many, it was as if their very blood had been poisoned by the devil. The most terrible and contagious form of the Black Death was pneumonic plague. Unlike the others, this variety attacked the lungs and could be transmitted through the air, through droplets expelled by coughs or sneezes from infected individuals. The symptoms included violent coughing, shortness of breath, and coughing up blood. Pneumonia set in quickly, leading to respiratory failure. In villages and towns, entire families were dying within days, with no one able to help. Pneumonic plague was the deadliest of all. 90 to 100% of those infected died, often within just 1 to 3 days. During the winter, when people crowded into enclosed spaces, the disease spread like fire in dry straw. It did not only affect Europe, but also Asia and North Africa, killing around 50 million people, which represented almost 1/3 of the European population at the time. But how did this terrible disease reach Europe? To understand this, we need to go back to its origins in the steppes of Central Asia. It is believed that the Black Death originated in the steppes of Central Asia, a vast region that today encompasses parts of Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and northwest China. This area was, and still is, inhabited by wild rodents, such as marmots, which are natural hosts of the bacteria that causes the plague. Rodents like marmots and rats carried the bacteria in their blood. Fleas that parasitized these animals became infected when they bit them. When the rodents died, the fleas sought new hosts, including humans. The Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes that connected Asia to Europe, played a crucial role in the spread of the Black Death. Merchants, horses, and caravans transported not only silk, spices, and gold, but also infected rats and fleas. There are reports of plague outbreaks in China as early as the beginning of the 14th century, possibly related to the trade of marmot pelts. In 1331, a devastating outbreak in the province of Hebei, China, killed about 90% of the local population. The disease spread to other regions of Asia, including India and Persia, along trade routes. Imagine walking through the streets of a medieval city during the height of the Black Death, the heavy air, the disturbing silence, and the unbearable smell of decomposition. The cities, once vibrant, have turned into scenes of chaos, despair, and death. Let's explore what the environment and atmosphere of these places were like during this terrible pandemic. The cities were densely populated, with narrow streets and crowded houses. There were no adequate sewage systems. The garbage and human waste were thrown into the streets or nearby rivers. Rats were common, attracted by the garbage and grain stores. They were the main hosts of the fleas that transmitted the plague. The dead were piling up so quickly that there was neither time nor enough manpower to bury them. Bodies were left in the streets, in front of houses, or piled in mass graves. Accounts from the time describe the unbearable smell of decomposition that filled the cities. Many people were fleeing the cities in panic, abandoning their homes and businesses. Merchants closed their shops, and once bustling markets became deserted. Entire cities seemed like ghosts, with empty streets and sepulchral silence, broken only by the moans of the sick or the sound of carts collecting corpses. The fear was palpable in the cities hit by the plague. People did not know how the disease spread and sought supernatural explanations or scapegoats for the tragedy. Many believed that the plague was a divine punishment for sins committed. Others blamed miasmas, bad airs, or planetary alignments. Minorities, such as Jews, lepers, and foreigners, were accused of poisoning wells or intentionally spreading the disease, leading to persecutions and massacres. The miasma theory, as mentioned earlier, common in medieval medicine, suggested that disease was caused by contaminated air or foul air from decomposing matter, such as bodies or garbage. This idea led people to burn aromatic herbs or flee to rural areas in an attempt to escape the poisonous air. Medieval medicine was still far from understanding the true causes of diseases, such as bacteria and viruses. The medical theories of the time were based on ancient concepts, mainly from Greece and Rome, and mixed science, religion, and superstition. But the Black Death was not just a directly humanitarian tragedy. Indirectly, it also caused other profound transformations. Let's explore this now. The Black Death was not just a humanitarian tragedy, it also caused profound social, cultural, and economic transformations in medieval Europe. The shortage of workers led to significant changes in feudal society. With less available labor, peasants and artisans began to demand better payments. The relationship between feudal lords and serfs was shaken, as the peasants had more bargaining power. Many peasants abandoned the fields and migrated to the cities in search of better opportunities. Movements like the Peasants' Revolt in England in 1381 were driven by dissatisfaction with working conditions and taxes. The scarcity of basic products, such as food, led to a widespread increase in prices. Many nobles and feudal lords faced financial difficulties as they depended on the income from the peasants. The Black Death not only changed society but also left its mark on art and literature. Imagine works depicting skeletons dancing with the living, symbolizing that death does not choose its victims. These representations, known as danse macabre, and objects like memento mori reminded people of the inevitability of death. Authors like Giovanni Boccaccio in the Decameron captured the impact of the plague on Italian society, showing how art reflected the fear and fascination with death. The Black Death accelerated the end of the Middle Ages and paved the way for the Renaissance, with a new emphasis on humanism and science. The crisis also stimulated the questioning of social and religious structures, contributing to the Enlightenment. The end and decline of the Black Death did not occur abruptly, but rather gradually, over decades and even centuries. The pandemic that ravaged Europe in the 14th century ceased to be a devastating outbreak, but the Yersinia pestis bacterium never completely disappeared. Over time, many people who survived the plague developed partial immunity to the Yersinia pestis bacteria. This reduced the transmission rate, as fewer people were susceptible to the infection. The plague killed not only humans, but also many of the rodents that served as hosts for the infected fleas. With fewer rodents, the fleas had fewer opportunities to reproduce and spread the disease. The climate in Europe began to change in the late 14th century with the onset of the Little Ice Age. Colder temperatures may have reduced the population of fleas and rats, making it difficult for the disease to spread. After the Black Death, many cities began to invest in sewage systems, street cleaning, and garbage removal. This reduced the population of rats and fleas, the main vectors of the disease. Although medieval medicine did not yet understand the bacterial cause of the plague, practices such as burning the clothes and belongings of the infected helped control its spread. In the 19th century, with the development of microbiology, the bacterium Yersinia pestis was identified, and effective treatments, such as antibiotics, were created. The plague never completely disappeared. It still exists in some regions of the world, mainly in rural areas of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. However, today, the disease is much less lethal and more controllable. The end of the Black Death was not a singular event, but a gradual process influenced by biological, social, and environmental factors. Although the disease ceased to be a global threat, it reminds us of the importance of science, hygiene, and cooperation in facing public health crises. Thank you very much for staying with us until now. Stay in peace and see you next time.